Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the premiere episode of Making of the Fuel Speedway. So this is a series. It's basically a podcast type series where I will explain what went into the making of Stories of the Fuel Speedway. So let's just begin by what Stories of the Fuel Speedway is. So it all actually started when I was writing my first novel called Ignited. Actually, back then it was called Velocity, and it was about these teenage characters who raced around in. Originally, it was motorcycles, but I decided I wanted something far more unique, and I went with Formula One. So it evolved into an underground motorsports story with teenagers in it. So it was a young adult story. And I just got so fascinated because there were just so many things I could do with this. So I'm currently writing a trilogy. I've written the first book. I'm currently writing the second book, but overall it'll be a trilogy. But eventually I realized that I could actually write more than just this trilogy, because I actually could write even further than that. So I decided, okay, maybe I'll make it two trilogies. First, I have to see if I can actually finish the first trilogy, but now I'm committed because of this series. But we'll get to that in a moment. The second trilogy, because I wanted to go with that idea that, when you're writing a high school drama, especially in American TV shows, there's this very unique thing. It's not really unique anymore because more and more TV shows are doing it, but it works. It works because what they do is, after they spend the first couple of seasons in high school, because it is an honest to God high school drama, they usually have a problem. They found in the past to have a problem when the next season after they've matriculated starts in university, and it's hard to keep all the main characters in one school and so on, and it becomes very difficult. Only very few shows have managed it. But what became popular is just skip the so-called college years or the varsity years. Just jump those. In America it's 4 years. Just go from when they matriculated, and the very next season will start when they come back into town after they've graduated. Or sometimes you need to be more unique than that, jump a year further when they've actually started work, when they're actually adults, actually doing the adult thing. And I liked this idea. I liked it because it keeps things fresh. It almost makes that first episode of that season feel like a new premiere, a new pilot almost. So I wanted to go with this if I do eventually write a second trilogy, in that what I want to do is I want to jump the varsity years. I want to jump about 5 years between when the first trilogy ended, which was in their matric year, and when the new trilogy will begin, which is when they're full-grown adults. University is officially behind them, and they're actually in the adult world. And then I realized that, okay, I'm going to jump 5 years. What happens in between these two trilogies? Because I know where I want to start the new trilogy. I know I want to start it, which is basically, not to give too much away, but basically it's no longer underground. The whole drama of the real racing scene is no longer underground. It's now legitimized. Mood Swing went and legitimized it, and that's not giving anything away because that's in the series. It's part of the mythology. And I realized, that mythology, there's a lot of stories to tell, which is why I decided, okay, those 5 years, I'm going to write 5 seasons where every week these characters are going to come, and they're going to, like an array of characters are going to come and actually going to showcase their stuff in a weekly basis. And the reason I felt so comfortable doing this goes back to one of the small reasons, the small inspirations. It's actually quite big, but I forced myself to make it smaller in the trilogy, in the first book, which is that the idea behind how to do this with motorsports is because of professional wrestling WWE mainly. I somehow in my head I watched Formula One day, and the same day I watched professional wrestling, and these two things smashed together in my head, which is when I got the idea of writing Ignited. I knew exactly what I wanted it to be, and which was these high school kids who watched too much Formula One and too much professional wrestling decided to put these two things together. The main thing that came out of that, was that racers don't race in a pack. It's not just here 20 race cars and we're going to just go at it, see who comes first. Instead, what makes this world very unique is that races race each other one-on-one. And that theme has stayed through the first trilogy, through Stories of the Fuel Speedway, right into the next trilogy. That what makes this series unique is that races race each other one-on-one. There's almost that element of, when you play this game, it's either you win or you lose. There's no middle ground. So that's what that has always been a theme, and that came from professional wrestling. Only one real match really has all the wrestlers jumping on top of each other to see who will win, but otherwise it's one-on-one. Now, I downplayed that because end of the day, in terms of my first story, the first trilogy, I downplayed that because I didn't, professional wrestling is still a niche to some people, so I needed to dial that back and make it more novel than some plaything. But when it came to Stories of the Fuel Speedway, I realized that I could use professional wrestling as my inspiration into the upteenth time, like to the absolute top level, because now I actually got something that, when you look at it, you'll see what I mean. It resembles professional wrestling. These guys show up to do their stuff every single week, and it basically feels like a soap opera written for men. Professional wrestling has that ideology in it, even though we know that women can watch it and do watch it and even perform in it. When you look at it, when you look at the feel of it, it feels like a soap opera for men. This ongoing storyline that has bounces between genres, that's all about a parade of characters where there is no one main character, and it just it keeps going and going and going. And that's what I wanted. That is exactly what I wanted for Stories of the Fuel Speedway, this ongoing soap opera that just seemingly never ends. But because our known mine had to be broken into seasons, it does in fact end. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and it has arcs specifically for this. But the characters go on, because there's always someone who's next in line to fight for the crown. Which brings me to the characters. I decided early on that, one, I didn't want to deal with my main characters in my trilogy too much, so I had to come up with an entire list of other characters who would also be an ensemble. I wanted them to be an ensemble. I did not want 1, 2, or even just 6 main characters. I wanted there to be so many that you could pick who was your favorite. You could pick why they were your favorite, and we could see what they get up to. In fact, when I first started writing it, I actually looked at it in those lines. I wanted to be able to, if you only like one character, to only read a through line of what that character is up to, and I enjoyed what I saw, because those characters bounce between storylines, bounce between different storylines, and actually see they interact with different characters, and they go about with different, because every week has a list of races, about 5 races that will feature most of the cast and the cast of characters, which I liked when I went about, I enjoyed the fact that I could use almost all the characters. But in order to ground it, I decided what I was going to do is every episode would follow one character, because there were that many, and that's the only way I know how to write an ensemble, especially when it comes to a short story series. That in order to get into the mind of at least one character, see what they feel, to experience what they experience when they do it, I realized I had to write every episode from a different character's perspective. But it follows the storyline in such a way that other characters will inevitably show up and interact with them. So that's what making of this series is going to be about. The making of the Fuel Speedway. It's going to be about what went into each of these episodes, how I went about writing them, and what it is that I was trying to get across in terms of stories. There's a lot of storylines, there's a lot of characters, and there's a lot of fun, because right in the first episode I explained that it's a high school playground. Basically, what would adults be like if they just could get away with doing what they did in high school? Except now there's no adult supervision. And I know you're thinking that would basically varsity, but it's not. You're still under your parents' purview from a certain element. What if you were free of that and had to just go about doing the high school thing? And that's what I ended up with here. Just adult characters sort of doing that high school thing, and this is what ensues.